You're welcome back, and you have been tuned into the Joy Change Speakers series. This is series number 2. Let's go straight away to a young man representing the youth. He's been at the forefront of a number of, call it, protests for what the youth demand. Ernesto Yeboah is leader, Economic Fighters League. Thank you for joining us, Ernesto.
Thank you very much, Samson, and a very good morning to your viewers and listeners. Samson, we've been at this journey for about 20 years now. And in all these 20 years, we've been asking ourselves very fundamental questions. Questions as to what kind of society do we want? What kind of system would bring about that society that we so much yearn for? And as we have been at this, we came to no other conclusion that we ought to look at our laws. Some of the questions that arise are the fact that where are our laws coming from? And so you take the example of the Plant Breeders Bill. And when you read the Plant Breeders Bill of Chile, of Taiwan, of Japan, of all the other countries where they have been tabled, including that of Ghana, very little changes. And so we ask ourselves, where are our laws coming from? Laws coming from, are they rooted in, African philosophy, for instance? Are they coming from us? These are, for us, questions that we may want to go into, in the near future, but for the lack of time. Now, you take the idea of corruption, fighting corruption, and we'll talk a lot about it. We'll do this. But more often than not, they are not practical, because the ideas only suggest that we are going to deal with the individual, when we all know that corruption has social implications. So if it has social implications, and African etymology or African philosophy suggests to us that when a man or a woman misconduct himself or herself, the shame does not come to just the man alone or the woman alone, but it comes to the family. Where do we find this line, this streak of social philosophy in the African setting in our laws? And so one of the things that the Economic Fighters League will do will be to impose what we call the thief tax, where when a man is said to have stolen from us, we don't waste our money by accommodating that person in prison and feeding that person and catering for the medical expenses of that person. We are not going to do that. What we seek to do is to let that person live within the society and face the social shame thereof. But it is not just him going to repay our monies, to us. It is also going to be imposed on the family members and beneficiaries, including the churches they attend, or the mosque or religious settings that they find themselves in. So, in our cause for a new constitution, one of the subject matters that hasn't come up, which is framed in a question, is, so what do you want to see in that new constitution? Today, we want to present just one of the things that we want to see in that new constitution. And we are talking about proportional representation. We believe that there is a winner-takes-all problem in our politics, and it has been suggested many times. And because there is a winner-takes-all problem in our politics, it has led to what we call the politics of exclusion. The vast majority of our people are not engaged in the politics of our country. Now, this is what we are presenting as the solution. And we are looking at proportional representation in the light that it identifies 3 very important, and that is not to say the rest are not, but these are more or less in a majority We are talking about women. We are talking about youth. We are talking about people who belong to the physically challenged community, and those also within the brackets of the professional class whose ideas and involvement may be very necessary in legislation and yet are nowhere to be found in our politics. Okay, so what is proportional representation? It's basically an electoral system where parties are represented in decision-making proportionate to the percentage of votes they get at the national level. So if we want to use the 2020 electoral results as an example, then PP secured 51% nationally. What it means is that currently they have 137 seats in parliament. What it would mean is that they would have 141 seats in parliament under a proportional representation system. The NDC that had 47%, currently with 137 seats in parliament, would have had 130 seats in parliament. And this country would have had the benefit of the likes of GUM, who would have been represented with 2 seats in parliament. So in all the brouhaha going on, all the noise, in all the conversations happening in parliament, the tensions and all of that, Ghanaians would have had the opportunity to hear what GUM is saying. But because of the current system we are practicing, we do not have the benefit of their voice. Now, proportional representation is very flexible, such that many countries adapt it to their particular circumstances. So if you go to the likes of Denmark, South Africa, Germany, Rwanda, they have their own type of proportional representation. And we believe that here in Ghana, we can have our own type of proportional representation. Now, if you take a look at the population demography, men, women constitute about 50.7% of the entire population, and men constitute 49.3% of the entire population, which simply tells you that women are more than men in this country. And yet when it comes to the decision-making table, women are almost nowhere to be found. It's quite surprising, something that quite a significant number of gender advocates or activists aren't talking about proportional representation. They are instead talking about affirmative action. Now, by proportional representation, we are breaking the hands of patriarchy, which is what the gender activism is all about. It's about breaking the hands of patriarchy and establishing a system which is fundamentally equal for all who live in it. We are also looking at the other constituency. We are talking about youth, who, also constitute a majority in a society, and yet are nowhere to be found in decision making. Today, ask yourself, what roles do young people and women play in our politics? They are cheerleaders. Cheerleaders. Wait until election time, get them T-shirts, and unfortunately, for women, they are simply sexualized. It becomes a back raise than a raise of the mind and ideas in contribution to what must change and what must be retained. So now, there are some who have raised the idea of possible dangers in a system like this. They have said that it can lead to unstable government. And this is why we bring in what we call the proportional representation that can be tailored for Ghana's own. One of the things that we are looking at, for instance, is that this proportional representation should happen at the parliamentary level. At the presidential level, look, we even advocate that the 50% plus 1 that has to be secured under our current system of first past the post should be scrapped to a simple majority. So it's the proportional representation does not happen at the executive level. It happens at the parliamentary level to give voice to our people. Now, why do we want proportional representation for Ghana? We want proportional representation for Ghana in order to promote the politics of inclusion. We want more women, we want more youth, we want our best and scarce brains. I don't think we are making a very good use of the likes of Kweku Baako and Kwesi Pratt in this country. We have reduced them to radio talks and television programs, and that's just it. But with proportional representation, these knowledgeable men and women we have in our society could have a place to, as it were, influence policy conversations and discussions and all of that. Proportional representation promotes a politics of conviction. How many of our men and women in politics are in there because of conviction and not because of their stomach or not because of, survival? This is what we are talking about. If we left the likes of Atiq Mohammed, very brilliant guy, yet, if we left the likes of Bernard Bonner, brilliant guy, yet, politics of conviction has its own place. And if we would allow for that kind of politics in our country, I believe that this country would be the better for it. Now, we also want to make the best use of our human resources, like I have already said. And then one of the things that we are looking at in this new constitution is to strip Parliament of parliamentary representation or constituency representation and just leave that to the DCs. If you want development in your constituency, go to your DC. They will construct the gutters, they will construct the roads, they will build the hospitals. Leave Parliament to represent their political parties. And in truth, if we want to be truthful with ourselves, our members of Parliament, do they speak to the concerns of their constituency or they speak to the concerns of their party? On e-levy, how many of them spoke on the concerns of their constituency? And if they did, e-levy would not have been passed. And so let us organize or have a system that allows, us to operate on the principle of honesty. And we believe that proportional representation is one of the ways by which we can do that. Now, the new constitution will be a development-led one. And proportional representation is a right system to galvanize the nation, towards it. We also want a change of the electoral system from first past the post to proportional representation, like we have said. We want and this is another idea, we want a second chamber. And by this second chamber, we want the collapse of the Council of States and the National House of Chiefs into this, second chamber. It's a lot of compromise. By ideological conscription, we don't even believe in that. But for the sake of our cohesion, we feel that the second chamber would bring all of these people on board. Right. Now, okay, so that's basically it. We've talked about the need for the proportional representation to happen just at the parliamentary level, right, so that we can have, the executive elected on simple majority.
Right. Ernesto Yeboah speaking on the courage to imagine. Can we at least take a step away from what we have practiced over this period without reaping the benefits? The courage to imagine. Ernesto Yeboah, leader, Economic Fighters League. He wanted to be able to speak to one issue in a way that leaves certain imprints